there's no longer any samsaric body. So then remainder means you have a remaining samsaric body, but since you don't have one even before you become enlightened, then you wouldn't speak of with or without remainder, right? Okay. All right. So this should suffice. Then you have on page 108 a way in which you can understand how to understand that cessation is possible. So understanding that ignorance and other afflictions are impermanent, understanding that there are methods to overcoming them, and so forth. So this may be helpful to read. And now lastly, the truth of the path. Whoa. Okay. All right, truth of the path. So truth of the path really just comprises the methods for attaining the truth of cessation. All right, what does that mean? So path consciousness is something that you cultivate by listening, contemplating, and meditating. And it eventually takes you to, well, in the case of liberation, takes you to liberation, or in the case of Buddhahood, it takes you to full enlightenment. Here, since we only discuss liberation, well, we speak about the path consciousness that leads you to liberation. Now, one part that may be important to mention is that in the Hinayana, in the Theravada and the Mahayana tradition, path, the truth of the path, are explained differently, but there's no contradiction. In the Theravada tradition, they speak of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is an extensive version of the three trainings: the training in morality, the training in concentration, and the training in wisdom. But there's no contradiction to that. And to the Tibetan system, or in the Mahayana tradition, here in particular we're speaking of the Tibetan tradition, when there is an explanation of the Noble Eightfold Path, that is explained. In particular in the Gelugpa system, it is explained in the context of studying the 4th chapter of Maitreya's Ornament. Like I said, the Four Noble Truths are explained in the 1st chapter of Maitreya's text, but then in particular the Noble Eightfold Path as the 4th truth, that is explained in the context of the 4th chapter. It extensively explains each of the eight noble path. But there is no contradiction that in the Tibetan system, although they do explain the Noble Eightfold Path, when they talk of path, they speak more of the 5 path. Okay? So why is there no contradiction? Well, there's no contradiction because the Noble Eightfold Path is basically an extensive version of the 3 trainings, in that it describes the different aspects of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So the 3 trainings in the Eightfold Path constitute different types of practice that are important at every stage of our spiritual development. While still learning to become, or still on the path to becoming liberated, those 3 are all important. The 5 paths, on the other hand, describe the different levels of attainment, gradually taking us to liberation. In fact, the Eightfold Path is contained in the 5 paths. For a practitioner on any of the 5 paths must engage in the practice of the Eightfold Path and thereby in the practice of the 3 trainings in order to be able to attain nirvana. So they're just different paradigms. Okay? So the Eightfold Path and the 5 paths are not contradictory systems, but different paradigms of the truth of the path. Okay? So then in the next page you have an explanation of the 3 trainings. You can read this. Many of you already know what the 3 trainings are. Leora briefly mentioned, do you remember a few days ago, how ethical behavior leads to better concentration and then in turn leads to wisdom. So this explanation you also find here on page 110. And then after having explained the 3 trainings, I had cited briefly the Eightfold Path. And then on page 112, you can see how the 3 trainings, how they are kind of a shorter version of the Eightfold Path. So right speech, right action, and right livelihood is part of the training in ethics. Right effort, right mindfulness. No, actually, right effort is part of all of them, but it is sometimes mentioned as part of the concentration. But actually, right effort is important for all 3 trainings. So right effort here is mentioned as right effort, but more specifically, right mindfulness and right concentration is part of the training in concentration. And the training in wisdom, so right view and right thought is part of the training in wisdom. Okay, so the 3 trainings in the Eightfold Path can be explained in that way. And then you have at the end the 5 paths. No, Yeah, yeah. Actually, you have a sentence on page 115 where it says an explanation of the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of the Mahayana will be given below. But I couldn't find it. I must have added it before, but I forgot to add it to this material. Anyway, there is no time. So you have an explanation of the Four Noble Truths. You can talk about them, and I'll say a few words just at the very end. It's quite easy, but this is from the point of view of the Hinayana. And of course, the Hinayana is the foundation of the Mahayana. So in order to become enlightened, this has to be done first. Okay? So the path of accumulation. Now, okay, you don't have to go through the Hinayana path of accumulation and so forth. That's not necessary. But to attain the cessation of afflictions, that precedes full enlightenment. So that is still done. So you first attain the cessation, the Hinayana cessation, or associated with the Hinayana, by removing the afflictions and suffering. That comes first, and then enlightenment follows. Okay, but here I've only described the process of the five paths. So first, in order to enter the path to liberation, you first need to have the wish to do so. Right? That's called renunciation. Renunciation is not what we sometimes think renunciation is. Renunciation is the wish to overcome which of the three types of suffering? It's a trick question. Which of the three types of... All of them. Yeah, all of them. The third, if you wish for the third one, it's also a correct answer, because included in the third one is number 1 and 2. I love teaching in Israel. People give the right answers. It's so easy. Seriously, that doesn't happen all the time. Anyway, but here it does. Anyway, so the path of accumulation, you generate the wish to overcome the three types of suffering. So, wishing to overcome the suffering of suffering is not renunciation. Otherwise, we all have renunciation. Okay? Yeah, we can all renounce the suffering of suffering. So, we all renounce that. But the wish to be free from even this limited mind and body, that is the wish to be liberated. Okay? It's just to be free from this mind and body. That's the same as wishing for liberation. And that's the only way we enter the path of accumulation. And it's easy to renounce the first one. It's most difficult to want to overcome the suffering of change. It's difficult because I love my suffering of change. I love it. Right? I mean, I'm attached to my suffering of change. It would be actually so easy to enter the path if I wasn't so attached to my suffering of change and very much attached to this mind and body. And yeah, anyway. So, but once you attain the wish to overcome samsara, once you overcome, in other words, a wish to overcome the three types of suffering, you enter the path of accumulation. That's the first step. But then you have to realize emptiness. You have to realize ultimate reality. You cannot move on to the next level unless you realize reality. And you also have to generate what's called calm abiding. Calm abiding. So you must, independent of the understanding of emptiness, you try to generate a realization of emptiness, a conceptual realization of emptiness, independence on reasoning. But at the same time, you also generate concentration. You have to focus, you have to engage in single-pointed meditation in order to be able to concentrate for at least 4 hours on one object. At least for 4 hours. Not 4 minutes, 4 hours. 4 minutes is hard enough, but 4 hours. Okay. And once you can do that, you can concentrate for 4 hours on one object, your realization of emptiness now and your understanding and your concentration need to be practiced together. Okay, right now it's like when we think of emptiness, we cannot focus. And when we focus, we cannot think of emptiness. Right? The mind that thinks of emptiness, that analyzes emptiness, needs to go back and forth to such a degree that focus is difficult. However, you can train yourself. Once you've realized emptiness, you focus on emptiness, you just focus on it. And then, after you've focused, you go back to analysis. And you go back to focus and analysis. And by going back and forth, often enough and long enough, slowly the mind that analyzes becomes more focused. So initially it's like you focus on emptiness, but you cannot analyze it. When you analyze it, you cannot focus. But because of doing it alternatively, going back and forth, slowly, when you focus on emptiness, you can also analyze a little bit. And then when the mind becomes too distracted, you let go of the analysis and you focus again. And then when you just focus and you cannot analyze, right, then you go back a little bit to the analysis. But at some point, the analysis becomes subtler and subtler such that you can analyze, but you still focus single-pointedly. So the analysis has become so subtle. And this is what I'm thinking, actually, the analogyism you mentioned when you talked of Jesuma, like the fish in the ocean, the analysis that you gave, that you said she gave, I actually only know this analogy in the context of generating a union of this concentration and analysis, where your mind is like a still lake, right? Because of the single-pointed concentration, now your mind is like a still lake, and it can still analyze like a very small fish moving underneath the surface without disturbing the surface. So the mind is just as single-pointedly concentrated, and the fish is like the analytical aspect. When you can do this, you can analyze emptiness. In other words, you can focus on emptiness by way of analyzing it to some degree. You realize emptiness, but not just focusing, but you actually understand it, and at the same time you're totally focused. Then you have attained the union of calm abiding and special insight, taking emptiness as the object. 2021.
Analyze the emptiness of the self once and then analyze the emptiness of phenomena, or
You could choose either. You can take just the emptiness of phenomena or just the self. But usually people would do both.
It's not self-thinking in analysis system?
Pardon?
It's not the self-thinking in analysis system?
No. That is in accordance from the Prasangika school point of view. Yeah. It's the lack of inherent existence. Whether you focus on the self or other phenomena, you may choose whichever you want. And once you've reached that level, when you can do the union of calm abiding, you've probably taken both to mind and you've realized both. It's different. But according to the Prasangika school, as it explained in the Tibetan tradition, that's how it's explained. So it's to be seen what's right or not. But I'm just giving you that presentation. Anyway, but you still haven't realized emptiness directly yet. So with the union of calm abiding and special insight, the way I just described, when you have this mind that can realize emptiness like a fish and still be focused, that is the first moment of the path of preparation. But you still don't realize emptiness directly. It's a concept by way of an image of emptiness, of what you think emptiness refers to. You haven't realized it directly yet. So that takes place when you reach the path of seeing, when you have a direct experience of emptiness. That's the first moment of the path of seeing. That's when the mind that realizes emptiness directly starts eliminating things that are in the way to becoming liberated. The intellectually acquired misperception, ignorance, as I described earlier, that is now eliminated. But you still have the innate afflictions, the innate ignorance, that is still left. So again, you need to meditate, you need to habituate yourself to the direct realization of emptiness. When you start doing that, you enter the path of meditation and gradually eliminate also the innate misperception of reality. And step by step, layer by layer, you eliminate them. And when you have eliminated the subtlest, you reach the path of normal learning. It's like that. It's not that difficult. So I've kind of gone through it quickly. Some of you may find this difficult. Those who have studied before, it's much easier. But it's all written down in here. So don't be discouraged if you didn't understand what I just explained. It just takes time. But like I'm saying, the nature of this class is to just give you an overview. Okay? This is the nature of this class. Now, I did finish, kind of barely, what I was going to do this morning, but 115. So you still have the general meaning, and you have the how many more pages? 30 pages left. Well, you can do them on your own. It's not a literal translation of these two texts. I've just taken some of the more important debates. You may just find it interesting to get a taste of it. It's really like you have the basis. You've understood the Four Noble Truths. And then the rest is just... So when we study this, we first have a good sense of what the Four Noble Truths are. And then we go through this text. So the general meaning you will see is just a repetition of what we've done. Except the other text, the decisive analysis, gives more like what is exactly a definition, what is the truth of suffering, and it just has these debates that you may find interesting. I don't know whether you understand all of them, but I'm sure a lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. But I wanted to mention one last thing, because you had asked me before about the order of the Four Noble Truths, and that is mentioned in the general meaning at the very beginning. You have the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths mentioned as part of the general meaning. You could read those. Again, they're not difficult to understand. But the order of the Four Noble Truths, you see, the Buddha, the order of the Four Noble Truths from the point of view of their arisal is the truth of origin is first. First, there is karma and afflictions, or afflictions and karma, and then there is there's suffering. Pardon? Yeah, and likewise, so that's one. So you can actually divide the Four Noble Truths into two sets: the two afflicted sets and the two purified sets. The afflicted set and the purified set. The afflicted set refers to a cause-effect kind of two aspects of one being the cause of the other and one being the result of the other. So you have the cause as the truth of the origin. That gives rise to the result of suffering. So it's afflicted, because an afflicted cause, misperception of reality, giving rise to anger, attachment, then contaminated karma, that's the origin, and then giving rise to the truth of suffering. Right? That's the second truth. So the order of their arisal is that the second truth gives rise to the first. Then the second set is the purified set, where in order to overcome the truth of in order to overcome the first two, you practice the path. That is the fourth truth, and that gives rise to the truth of cessation. That's the third truth. Okay? So the second truth gives rise to the first truth, but in order to overcome the second and the first truth, you meditate on the path, the first truth, and achieve the truth of cessation. Okay? So this is really the order from the point of view of their arisal. But the Buddha presents the effects before the causes in order to demonstrate their application in practical understanding. So, it says here that the order of the Four Noble Truths, a little bit further down, the order of the Four Noble Truths is in accordance with the natural psychological processes of our mind, which starts by recognizing a problem and then investigates its causes. When we understand the causes, we come to know that it's possible to overcome the problem, which in turn motivates us to search for a solution. So in other words, life sucks, but there's a cause. It's possible to remove the cause. That's what you need to do. That's like a short version of the Four Noble Truths. And so it's a bit like an illness. So Maitreya in his Uttara Tantra, he describes the description of the Four Noble Truths. Like if you go to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, do you experience this symptom, this symptom, this symptom? And you think about it, and you go, oh, yes. Some symptoms you're aware of, some symptoms you're not. And the doctor kind of points this out. It's like you go to the Tibetan doctor and he says, do you experience this? Do you experience this? And you go, oh, yeah. Some of those symptoms you know, some you don't know. That is like explaining the truth of the suffering and the suffering of change. And then the doctor tells you, well, the thing is there's a cause for that. What causes those symptoms is such and such and such. Do you want to get rid of those symptoms? You go, yes. Maybe you say, no, I like them. But usually people say, I want to get rid of them. He says, yes, it's possible. It is possible. It's possible to eliminate them. That's explaining the truth of cessation. And then you ask, how? And then he explains the treatment. That's the truth of the path. So this is why Maitreya says in his Uttara Tantra, just as an illness should be recognized, its causes eradicated, a healthy state obtained, and the remedy applied, so should suffering, its causes, its cessation, and the path also be recognized, truth of suffering, eradicated, truth of origin, actualized, truth of cessation, and applied, truth of the path.
What page are you reading?
Page 117. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were able to follow. So page 117, as part of the general meaning, because of her question in particular with regard to the order. So this explains the order. And then you have the definitions, you have different types of sensations, the definition of the truth, and so forth. Unfortunately, I was unable to complete it. Yes, Leora?
Just a little comment, which is
Please.
a big discovery for me.
Okay.
Once you start to
Mm-hmm.
It's already the path.
Yes.
When you start to understand the suffering, the remedy is already there.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, the remedy is still there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very nice.
Yes, yes. I think Leora is very right here. In a way, yeah, I mean path, not literally like path of accumulation in a way. So in the no, not in the strictest sense, but in a looser sense, you're already yeah, you're already starting the treatment. Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit like that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we're done. Kind of. Well, there was a little bit left. We never got to do it, but maybe there is another time that we can do it. It's always auspicious to not. You see, like in Tibetan, it's said to be auspicious to not finish a text. And you know what they do? What they do in order to have that happen? When you finish the text, you read the first 2 lines again. Ah, you do the same? Ah, okay. In the Tibetan tradition, it's like you read again from the beginning, right? Ah, interesting. In the Bible, you do the same thing. So anyway, we don't need to do that because we never finished it. You're more auspicious. We don't need to fake it. Okay. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. I'm not just saying that because, wow, that was really refreshing. Your questions were on the spot. There were great questions and great comments. It was really a joy. I mean, it's no tiring at any moment. So all the discussions I enjoyed, yeah, because it's just so rewarding when those who listen have such great questions and get the things right away. So sometimes it's like when people don't get it and explain again and again, it can be a little exhausting, but none of that ever happened here. So thank you very much. And right. But it's just that's why I love teaching in Israel, because it's so rewarding, because people really get it. It seems, I'm not saying other people don't get it, but there's a tendency of getting it quicker. So please, I hope that encourages you to continue further, to get more teachings. No.
My attention so long, and I was so concentrated. I was surprised of myself.
If that was true, I would always have that experience, but I don't. I teach in Dharamsala all year long, and I don't always have that experience. But anyway, thank you very much, and let's spend now the last minutes to dedicate, because it's been a great course, and dedicate. Where's my little piece of paper? Shoshi. Oh yeah. So Shoshi Moshkovich, and then who's Danny's wife, who has cancer. Let's please dedicate for her, but also dedicate for everyone else we know who is sick, who is suffering mentally or physical. May they get better very soon. And for peace and Dharma in Israel. Let's pray for that, or anything else you find that's in your heart and you would like to dedicate the positive potential we have accumulated as a group here. And of course, most importantly, may we all become enlightened, may we all become awakened, reach the state of a Buddha, so be able to lead others to that same state. So with that in mind, let's do the final dedication.
I will do this time page 21 של דידרס עמוד 21. לכל בעלי התודעה, כל הסובלים בגופם ובנפשם, יזכו באוקיינוס של אושר ושמחה, בזכות חסד זה שצברתי. לו לא יסבול איש, יחלה או יעשה רע, לא יפחד ולא ימעיט בערכו בגלל תודעה השקועה בתכנות. לו יראו העברים מראות, לו ישמעו החרשים צלילים, וכל מי שגופו קורע תחת העול, יחדש את כוחותיו במנוחה. לו ישיגו הערבים על גוש והרעבים על שום, לו ימצאו עצמאים מים ומשקה תאים שירווה את עמונם. לו יזכו אביונים בשפע, ומי שתש כוחם מצער, יתמלאו שמחה. לו יהיו לו מיואשים תקווה, עושר מתמיד וברכה. לו ירדו הגשמים בעיתם, ויהיו היוונים מצויים בשפע. לו יועילו התרופות והתפילות הנדיבות לשא נפול. לו ירפאו כל החולים והסובלים במהרה ממחולותיהם. לו ייעלמו כל המחלות מן העולם ולא יופיעו. לו יחדלו הפוחדים לפחד וישוחרר כל מי שכבו. לא יינתן לחסרי ישע כוח, בני האדם יבקשו להיטיב זה עם זה. כל עוד יש חלל וכל עוד חיים בו בעלי תודעה, ואמשיך להתקיים גם אני כדי למגר את סבלות העולם. בזכות חסד זה, לו אשיג במהרה את מצב הברור בודה, ולהוביל למצב זה את כל הנודדים עד אחד. לו תודעת הערה אלאית לקראת הערך שטרם נולדה תיוולד, לו זו שנולדה לא תתנבא ותשגה עוד ועוד. בארץ זו המוקפת לכסי ערים ושלבים, מקור הרווחה והעושר ללא יוצא מן הכלל, אבל תשרה רב העוצמה תן במדיעת צום, ותתדר הקץ הקיום.
Okay, thank you. Have a safe trip home and maybe see you again in the future.
Geshe, thank you so much for coming here, for thinking about us, preparing this wonderful teaching. You've given us something to read and learn and practice for a whole year until the next year. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Get home safely.